Alright, hello everyone, it's Happy, and today we're going to be talking about the E5. I think a lot of you guys guessed it would be this tank. This is probably the most forgotten heavy tank at tier 10. There are going to be a few people who say, but Happy, I like playing the E5, yo. But in general, the player base has literally forgotten the E5. If you check the amount of players playing it per month, it has dropped drastically, and you don't see this tank that often in randoms or tournaments. Let's be honest, this tank has completely faded away into the sideline after Wargaming gave it a humongous nerf with the rest of the meta heavy tanks in the tournament section. So this tank literally got a huge DPM decrease and a few other nerfs, which made this tank completely obsolete. So now the DPM is worse, so therefore there is no point to playing the E5 because there are simply better tanks out there. Especially a lot of premium tanks or collectible tanks at tier 10 are going to be miles ahead of the E5. The E5 stood as the jack of all trades. It had decent armor, decent gun, and decent mobility. Now it really doesn't have, it doesn't seem like it has a lot of armor because the sides and the lower plate are just a big weak point anyway. And on top of that, the gun isn't as mediocre as it used to be. It used to be a good gun. Now it's average, maybe even below average, and therefore the tank has literally become, very obsolete. I think the IS-4 is still better than this tank in regards to everything possible. In terms of randoms, again, this thing won't survive as much. You won't be racking up as much damage. Of course, you'll say 1 second to the reload wouldn't have done too much, but there are better tanks out there. Let's be honest. The Chieftain, the MK6, is miles ahead of this thing, just like the new Concept or the Super Conqueror. All of those tanks would be much better compared to that of the E5. In terms of, tanks in the tech tree, you have the Yo, you have the new IS-7, and all of these tanks just make the E5 look like a piece of garbage. Let's be honest. And that's why the player base literally stopped playing this, and I don't see this tank in randoms at all anymore. And I really think that Wargaming didn't do the correct job with the meta heavy tanks like the Kron and the E5 because they wanted to reduce the heavy meta in tournaments, and that's the main reason as to why these tanks were nerfed, because they weren't really OP, they weren't really that strong, they were very well balanced tanks. However, after the nerf, they have just become pure garbage, and there's a reason as to why no one plays the Kron, no one plays the E5, no one plays the IS-4 anymore. It's simply because Wargaming didn't calculate it properly. They said this would reduce the heavy meta in tournaments, and yet here we are. All the E5s and the Krons have been replaced by IS-7s and the 60 TPs. You feel me? So there is literally no point. There was no point in the nerf, and I really think Wargaming should have thought a bit more on this, because it was very unjustified. A lot of these tanks were fan favorites, like myself. I had a lot of battles racked up in the E5, and yet it was nerfed for no reason. It was very well balanced. The ammo rack was always critical. On top of that, the armor isn't the best, the gun isn't the best. There was literally no point in nerfing this tank. They just wanted to reduce the amount of heavy tanks in tournaments, and they didn't do that. And so the E5 is still here just like that, because it was simply replaced by a 60 TP or something else. So that's the main reason as to why I really dislike the nerf Wargaming gave these tanks. Not just the E5, but the Kron as well. The FV215B is literally useless now. It's probably useless. A lot of players didn't really like it beforehand, but if they did, I would have put it in this video. But since it was already, kind of a neglected tank, I decided to make the E5 as one of the most forgotten tanks in Blitz, simply because no one thinks about this tank, or no one sees this tank anymore, and I don't think anyone ever talks about this tank, apart from E5, which I know is going to make a comment in the comment section. I think a lot of you guys saw him, so shout out to my Turkish boy E5. So yeah. These are the main reasons as to why the E5 has literally become obsolete and forgotten, even more than that of the IS-4. But overall, it's still a decent tank. But the fact of the matter is that there are just better tanks out there, and they're going to perform much better, as well as in tournaments, as well as in randoms. Therefore, the E5 has no place anymore, and I really think that the developers should give its old stats back, because otherwise it would just be unfair towards this tank and its fans. So with that, Happy is out, and I'll see you guys next time. Tell me if you guys agree or you guys may disagree.